Today on my channel I've dug out a cassette tape of me in 2001 talking to Ryan Gosling about his first starring role as a Jewish neo-Nazi in The Believer. Over the years, when people have said to me, who's the most famous person that you've interviewed as a journalist, my answers have tended to vary because fame waxes and wanes. People go in and out of fashion. Ryan Gosling hasn't always been the superstar he is today, and in 2001 I'd never heard of him. I don't think anyone in Britain had heard of him. I know now that he'd been a child actor in the Mickey Mouse Club in the 90s, but back then, as far as my newspaper was concerned, he was an unknown quantity. However, a Jewish film festival was taking place in the Hampstead area of North London, and the Hampstead and Highgate Express, otherwise known as the Hammond High, the poshest local newspaper in the world, asked me to go along and talk to him because he was in town publicising it. Nowadays, if a local newspaper had an interview with Ryan Gosling, they'd be trumpeting it from the rooftops, but I knew that this was just going to be a part of a larger story, and I rattled through my questions in about 10 minutes. So in this low-budget film, The Believer, which is written and directed by Henry Bean, who himself is Jewish, Gosling, who was actually brought up in a Mormon household, plays Danny Balint, a self-loathing Jew who actually becomes a skinhead, becomes a neo-Nazi. He doesn't actually let on to his fellow anti-Semites that he's Jewish, but he's this tortured, conflicted kind of guy who takes part in Jewish rituals, actually, but at the same time does things like vandalize a synagogue and is very articulate in his anti-Semitism. That's not as impossible as it sounds. The character was inspired by Daniel Burros, a member of the American Nazi Party and then the United Klans of America, who killed himself in 1965 when the New York Times outed him as a guy with a Jewish background. When I met Gosling, he was 20, a month away from his 21st birthday, actually. And I have a memory of the lady from the PR company saying words to the effect of, "Go easy on him, he's only 19. But I remember him as just very, very articulate and self-assured. And the London Listings magazine, Time Out, said the film is driven by Gosling's revelatory performance, arresting, prickly, vaguely funny even, difficult in the best sense. So here then is my tape recording, which I've tried to clean up as best I can.
To do with the Jewish Film Festival, but I'll be homing in on this and focusing in on The Believer.
Okay.
Because that's going to be the central the central thing as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
I saw the film last night and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But what did you think when you got the script?
I had a lot of questions. I think like everyone who sees the movie, I had a lot of questions. I mean, the main question was why. And I was just really interested in somebody who could offer you every reason to hate something, yet had such reverence for it at the same time, and still believed it. And I wanted to learn more about it. So, I wanted to meet Henry and to sort of figure out why he was making the movie. And when I met him, I was, convinced that he was making it for the same reasons I wanted to make it.
I mean, was it daunting to think that you were going to play someone he's not really sympathetic? I mean, he's confused.
Yeah.
But a lot of what he says is repulsive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was this like sort of a selfish reason to make a movie, because you're not really giving the audience much of a reason to sit through this for 2 hours.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily somebody you want to follow or be interested by. But at the same time, it's a true story, and it's a story that, I think, should be told. Because it's a very clear contradiction. I think it's just an example of contradictions that people live in every day.
How closely does it stick to the story of the real guy?
Well, loosely. It's loosely based. I mean, the real story is a kid named Daniel Burroughs.
Yeah.
Who, hated himself. It's about self-loathing. And, he was attending, Nazi rally meetings, and he was attending, KKK meetings. Meanwhile, he was bringing knishes to these meetings. And he was living two lives. And he became a pretty influential leader in the Nazi movement at that time, I guess 20 years ago. And he, gave an interview to the New York Times. They said it was about his ideas, but at the end of it, he said, how can you say all this if you're Jewish? And he said, if you print that, I'll kill myself. And he printed it, and he killed himself. So Henry kind of picked up where that left off. But the film, I think, became a much different story. It's to us, anyways. It's not a story about self-loathing or hate. It's about love. It's about loving something so much that makes you feel weak, and then you hate the fact that it makes you feel weak, so you start to hate it. It's about needing something, and not wanting to need anything.
So has it been misunderstood?
My son, yeah. I mean, America hasn't had a chance to see it.
Yeah, I was reading about it on an article on the internet, which I think had been in a magazine or something. And as I understand it, you got this grand jury prize at Sundance, and then you had trouble finding a distributor. Is that right?
Got the grand jury prize.
Yeah.
Everybody wanted it.
Yeah.
Then, when it came time to buying it, nobody wanted it.
Yeah.
Because they realized they'd have to actually release it. And, it was all sort of messy and downhill from there.
It went out on Showtime.
It hasn't. It was supposed to be released 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Because of what happened on the 11th.
Right.
They postponed it indefinitely. They're saying it'll be released in March.
Right.
I don't know. For sure.
So there hasn't been a situation of, people protesting with placards or anything like that. It's not that kind of deal.
No.
It's just that it's a controversial topic to begin with, and people are a bit scared of it.
Yeah. I mean, the only real opposition that we felt so far is from the Wiesenthal Center in New York, or in Los Angeles actually. Henry sent a tape to them. They said it was a breeding ground for anti-Semitic behavior, and there went our Jewish stamp of approval out the window. But I don't think you can ask for a Jewish stamp of approval on this film. I don't think it's even like that.
But it's been, it's part of the Jewish Film Festival in London, so.
But the thing is that nobody's going to. You're not going to reach one common response to the film. It's a film that everyone's going to receive differently, so I don't know how you can ask an organization to approve it. I completely disagree with them, and I think they're very wrong. I think it's cowardly. I think it's just the right thing to say, so you don't get in trouble. And I think they didn't really watch the movie. I think it's a film about love, and I think it's a film about any religion, and it's not about Judaism. I think it is about Judaism, clearly, but it's about anybody who's in a demanding religion. It could be like somebody said to Henry, "I want to make the Catholic version."
Yeah.
It's everywhere. it's a true story and it happened. You know, why can't you tell a true story?
You're not Jewish yourself.
No.
But you do the Jewish prayers and all that in the film. Did that involve a lot of research?
I mean, not enough. I mean, I should have been studying my whole life, really. But Henry's wife, she's the daughter of a rabbi, and she sort of spent a lot of time with me working on my Hebrew. And, you know, they got me a Chumash, and I was reading Chumash every morning. And, I was studying my Hebrew. And I went to shul. Yeah, I tried to study as much as I could. I mean, the Nazi part of it wasn't very important to me. It was hate. It was simple. It was blind. You know? But it wasn't a story about a Nazi kid. It was a story about a Jewish kid who arrived at this really confused conclusion with some answer he was looking for.
I mean, does it affect you when you're doing scenes? Well, when you're coming out with all this, the hate stuff, and I mean, the one scene that I found very powerful was where they desecrate the synagogue. You know, when you're doing something like that, does that have an impact on you personally?
Yeah. I mean, I grew to really love the religion. You know, I had such. I just a reverence, and I didn't know where it came from, you know, because it had 2 months exposure to it. You know, but the Torah desecration scene was extremely difficult, and I knew it was a fake Torah. You know, and I knew that there were no real Torahs in there. Everything was made by the props department. It was only one passage from the Torah that didn't have the name of God in it. That was just repeated throughout the whole Torah. So I knew that we weren't actually, you know, swearing or desecrating the name of God in Hebrew. I knew all of it. At the same time, I think I was more upset by it than anybody. You know, I didn't want to keep shooting. I thought we got it. Let's just be done. It's very difficult. You know, we shot that scene all night, and we just kept ripping up Torahs, and I just when was it going to end?
Got my props here. No, I think we've covered everything that I wanted to cover. And quicker than I thought we would. So, yeah, what's your next project, by the way?
Well, I did a film called The Slaughter Rule.
Yeah.
And that's David Morris and Clea Duvall. David's my favorite actor, by the way.
Yeah.
And that'll, I mean, hopefully we're going to go to Sundance with that in January. And also in January, or maybe February, a film called Murder by Numbers, which Barclay Schroeder directed. It's sort of loosely based on the Leopold Road.
Oh, yeah. That's Low.
Yeah.
Is that Low? Hitchcock? Yeah. Oh, right, okay. Which one are you? Low. And who was that in the Hitchcock one?
I don't remember. I mean, in our film, there's sort of the mind, and then there's the body.
Yeah.
You know, there's the internal and the external. And I played the external. I played the genitalia of the two. I played the mind.
Right. Well, it's only taken 10 minutes.
All right.
So we let the next interviewer in.